The words hit me like a physical blow. "The company will go to Victoria. You're fired." I stood there in my mother's office, stunned into silence. The plush carpet beneath my feet suddenly felt unstable, as if the ground itself was shifting. The morning sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows seemed harsh and unforgiving, much like my mother's expression. "What?" My voice came out as barely more than a whisper. It was just another Monday morning when I'd been suddenly summoned to the CEO's office. Now, my mother, the company president, sat behind her massive mahogany desk, a satisfied smile playing across her perfectly painted lips. Next to her stood my sister Victoria, sporting a smug grin that made my stomach churn. I had poured my heart and soul into working at my mother's company for years. This place was my only sanctuary, the only place where I felt I could prove my worth. I never dreamed of becoming CEO. I just wanted to keep working here, to continue building something meaningful. "This makes no sense," I managed to say, my voice trembling. "Please tell me why I'm being fired." "Why?" Mother's perfectly manicured fingernails drummed against her desk as she glanced at me with undisguised contempt. "Isn't it obvious? It's because you're ugly." The words hung in the air like poison. I felt my chest tighten as she continued. "Did you actually think you could become CEO? Don't be ridiculous," she scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. "An ugly duckling like you could never run this company. I mean, imagine how bad it would look for our brand image to have someone like you in charge. This beauty company needs someone beautiful and charming like Victoria."
"That's right,"
Victoria chimed in, tossing her perfectly styled hair over her shoulder.
"I'm perfect for this role."
Their combined laughter echoed off the office walls, making me feel smaller with each passing second. "I understand," I said quietly, turning to leave the office. The click of the door behind me felt oddly final, like the closing of a chapter in my life. But this wasn't the end. Soon after I resigned, the harassment from my mother began in earnest. Perhaps I should explain how things came to this point. My name is Rose Thompson, and I grew up in the shadow of beauty. I have a mother and a younger sister, Victoria. My mother runs, or rather ran, a successful cosmetics company and has always been strikingly beautiful. Victoria takes after her. She's been gorgeous since childhood, with the kind of face that turns heads and opens doors. I, on the other hand, apparently take after my father. Growing up, my mother never let me forget that I was neither cute nor pretty. Our family dynamics were set in stone early on. My father passed away when I was young, or so I was told, leaving Victoria and me to be raised by her single mother. Despite being a busy CEO, she always made time for Victoria. Every dance recital, every school event, every minor achievement was celebrated with fanfare and pride. I remember one particular incident that perfectly encapsulated our family dynamic. I was 12 and Victoria was 10. It was a bright Saturday morning when Victoria bounded into the kitchen, her eyes sparkling with excitement.
"Mom, I want new clothes,"
she announced, already knowing the answer she'd receive. Mother looked up from her morning coffee, her face softening into a warm smile. "Of course, sweetie. Let's go shopping." I watched this exchange from my corner of the kitchen, where I sat doing homework. "But don't you have work?" I ventured to ask, knowing Mother had mentioned an important meeting earlier that week. "Nothing's more important than my Victoria," Mother declared, already reaching for her car keys. Victoria squealed with delight.
"I love you, Mom."
"You're just the sweetest thing," Mother cooed, pulling Victoria into a tight embrace. Gathering my courage, I spoke up. Mom, can I come too?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as Mother turned to look at me, her expression hardening. "Ugh, absolutely not. You stay home and watch the house. Why would I want to be seen in public with someone who looks like you? Besides, looking at your face just reminds me of him and puts me in a bad mood." That was the way things were in our household. I learned early on that my mother despised how much I resembled my father. She treated me with a cold indifference while doting on Victoria, always prioritizing her over me. Of course, I was left at home countless times, watching through the window as they drove away to another shopping spree, another lunch date, another mother-daughter bonding activity. I barely have any memories of going anywhere with my mother. The few times she did take me along were usually when there was no one else available to watch me. And even then, she'd keep me at arm's length, as if afraid my plainness might somehow be contagious. Even as a child, I understood that she didn't like me. It wasn't something that needed to be explained. It was evident in every dismissive glance, every harsh word, every time she turned away when I reached for her. Time passed, but Mother's attitude never changed. Victoria remained the favorite, while I continued to be called ugly and plain. The names became a constant backdrop to my life, as familiar as my own reflection in the mirror. Before I knew it, I was a high school senior. The hallways buzzed with excitement as everyone discussed their future plans.
Rose, have you decided which college you're going to?
My classmate Amy asked one day during lunch. I forced a laugh, pushing my food around on my plate. Not yet.
Really? Well, I'm planning to study business at State University. You should apply too. We could be roommates.
College discussions were becoming more frequent among my classmates. Everyone seemed to have a plan, a direction, a future mapped out before them. I didn't have a specific school in mind, figuring I'd decide on my career path once I got there. But knowing my mother, I thought it would be pointless to discuss it with her, but I decided to try anyway. One evening, I found her in her home office, reviewing some documents. "Mom," I began hesitantly, hovering in the doorway. She didn't even look up. "What? I don't have time to talk to someone who looks like you." I swallowed hard but pressed on. I want to go to college." "Excuse me?" She finally looked up, her eyes narrowing. Deep down, I knew what was coming. The words hadn't even left her mouth, but I could already feel them cutting into me. Mother looked at me with disdain and said, "I'm not wasting money sending someone like you to college. Victoria's education is going to be expensive enough. You're getting a job." I understand," I mumbled, backing out of the office. As expected, Mother wouldn't allow me to pursue higher education, so I had to look for work instead. The job search was disheartening. With little motivation and limited options for high school graduates, finding employment proved challenging. Each rejection felt like confirmation of what my mother had always told me, that I wasn't good enough. Then, one day, Mother called me into her office at home. "You really are useless. Nothing like Victoria," she declared, examining her perfect manicure. "Fine, I'll give you a job at our company. It's the least you can do after I raised you. You'll work as a sales associate at our drugstore branch on the outskirts of town." She smirked as she assigned me what she called a fitting position for someone like you. The contempt in her voice was clear. This wasn't an opportunity. It was a punishment. That's how I began working as a cosmetic sales associate at my mother's company. The early days were particularly challenging. Our store was in a busy shopping district, and I had to learn everything from scratch. "Welcome," I would call out to customers, trying to sound confident despite my insecurities. Years passed as I worked at the drugstore. The workplace was dominated by beautiful, assertive women who reminded me of my mother and Victoria. Perhaps due to my upbringing, I struggled with customer service, and my sales performance suffered. I could never quite shake the feeling that I didn't belong in a beauty store. The whispers followed me everywhere.
Why does someone like her work here?
One colleague would say, loud enough for me to hear.
She's such a burden,
Another would respond.
With her looks, how can she sell makeup? Who'd buy cosmetics from someone who makes them look worse? So true!
They would laugh, making sure their voices carried across the store floor. My colleagues would gossip about me constantly, not even trying to be subtle. Their words were like paper cuts, small but painful, accumulating day after day.
She looks nothing like the CEO or Victoria. Maybe she's adopted?
They walked away laughing, their perfectly coordinated heels clicking against the floor in unison. I couldn't defend myself and just silently continued checking inventory, trying to make myself as small and unnoticeable as possible. "Rose, don't listen to them." The voice came from behind me, warm and fierce with indignation. I turned to see Sarah, her name tag slightly askew on her uniform. Sarah was the only person at work who treated me normally. A high school student working part-time, she knew everything about makeup, from drugstore brands to luxury lines, and was incredibly skilled at applying it. Her enthusiasm for cosmetics was infectious, and she approached her job with a genuine desire to help people feel beautiful. "But what they're saying is true," I said, arranging products on a shelf. "Someone plain like me selling cosmetics is pretty weird." "You're not plain at all," Sarah protested angrily on my behalf, her hands on her hips. "Those girls wouldn't know true beauty if it hit them in the face with a makeup brush. Besides, our store's poor performance is because of their awful customer service. Have you seen how they treat anyone who isn't wearing designer clothes? It's horrible." I know I'm part of the problem. Sarah's expression suddenly changed, a mischievous glint appearing in her eyes. "Hey, Rose, are you free after work?" "Huh? Just trust me." She grinned, already backing away toward the register where a customer was waiting. I could only watch in confusion as Sarah walked away with a smile that suggested she was plotting something. After our shift ended, Sarah was waiting for me in the break room. She had transformed the small space into an impromptu makeup station, complete with brushes, palettes, and various products arranged neatly on the table. Sarah?" "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." She patted the chair in front of her. "Sit down and let me work my magic." I quietly submitted to Sarah's expertise, closing my eyes as she began applying products to my face. Her touch was gentle but confident, and she hummed softly as she worked. "You have such beautiful bone structure," she commented as she blended something on my cheeks. "And your eyes are gorgeous. They just need the right enhancement to really pop." Finally, after what seemed like both an eternity and no time at all, Sarah stepped back with a satisfied smile. "Done." "Wow! Is this really me?" Looking in the mirror Sarah handed me, I saw a completely different person. The face looking back at me wasn't plain or ugly. It was refined, elegant even. Sarah had somehow brought out features I never knew I had, creating a look that was both natural and striking. "See? I knew it," Sarah exclaimed triumphantly. "Your face takes makeup really well. You keep calling yourself plain, but look how much difference the right makeup makes. You have amazing features. They just needed the right products and techniques to shine." I couldn't take my eyes off the mirror. The person reflected there looked confident, professional, beautiful even. It was still me, but a version of me I'd never imagined could exist. "Sarah, do you think I could learn to do this?" "Of course." Her face was lit up with excitement. "I'd be happy to teach you. We can start with the basics and work our way up. You'll be a pro in no time." "Thank you." For the first time in years, I felt a spark of hope. Having always been told I was ugly and plain, I lacked confidence in everything I did. But maybe I could change. Maybe there was more to me than what my mother and Victoria had always claimed. With this thought, I threw myself into studying makeup with an intensity that surprised even Sarah. Every free moment was dedicated to learning and practicing. I learned which products could conceal specific concerns and how to use them effectively. I studied color theory, skin types, and application techniques. I tested products on myself, taking detailed notes about their performance and photographing the results from different angles. After removing one product, I try another, documenting everything meticulously. My bathroom counter at home became a testing laboratory, covered in swatches and samples. I began recommending products to customers based on my personal experience, but with a different approach than before. Instead of just making suggestions based on what was popular or expensive, I'd first have a consultation to understand their concerns, then introduce products that could address their specific issues. "Tell me what bothers you most about your current makeup routine," I would ask customers, really listening to their answers. While everyone wants to look beautiful with makeup, their specific goals vary. Some want bigger looking eyes, others want perfect skin, and some focus on concealing pores. Everyone's makeup needs are different, and I learned to tailor my recommendations accordingly. One day, a customer came in looking frustrated.
"I've tried everything," she said, "but nothing seems to work for my under-eye circles."
Instead of immediately suggesting products, I asked questions about her lifestyle, sleep patterns, and current skincare routine. Then, I recommended a combination of color-correcting concealer and a hydrating eye cream. A week later, she returned with a bright smile.
"Rose, the primer you recommended works amazingly. I can't believe what a difference it makes."
"I'm so glad you like it," I replied, genuinely happy to have helped.
"And I was wondering about this product."
She pulled out her phone to show me an advertisement. "Ah, yes, that one works best if you apply it with a damp sponge and pat it in gently. But honestly, for your skin type, I think this alternative might work even better." Seeing customers' joy motivated me to study makeup even more. Each success story, each happy customer built my confidence bit by bit. One quiet afternoon, as we restocked shelves together, Sarah nudged me with her elbow.
"Rose, you've really changed lately."
"Really, Sarah?"
"Definitely. You're so much more confident now, and customers love you. Have you noticed how many people specifically ask for you?"
That makes me happy to hear. It all started when Sarah gave me that makeover. Getting such praise from Sarah, who had sparked this change, meant the world to me. I felt like I had finally proven that people can change if they want to. Then one day, everything changed again. Me? Really? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mr. Anderson, the owner of the city's most prestigious department store, had visited our store and was now offering me a position at their cosmetics counter. He had happened to visit while I was doing consultation with a customer, and apparently, he'd been impressed by my approach. "Your attention to detail and genuine care for customers is exactly what we're looking for," he said, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "I've already cleared it with your mother, so the position is yours if you want it." I accepted without hesitation, though a small part of me wondered why my mother had agreed so easily. Little did I know, this would be the beginning of both my greatest success and my biggest challenge. My sales performance at the department store was excellent from the start. The environment was more upscale than the drugstore, but my approach remained the same, focusing on each customer's individual needs and concerns. Word of mouth spread quickly. Customers began requesting makeup demonstrations, wanting to see techniques in person rather than just hear descriptions. My consultations became known for being thorough and personalized, and soon I had a regular clientele. When Mr. Anderson heard about this growing reputation, he called me into his office. The space was warm and inviting, nothing like my mother's stark, modern office. "Rose, would you be interested in hosting events at the store?" "Events?" "Your reputation is spreading, and our sales are fantastic. Given your popularity, I thought weekend demonstrations for a few hours might work well. We could set up a proper space, invite customers to learn directly from you." "If you think I'm qualified, I'd love to." "Wonderful. We'll start planning right away." As I watched Mr. Anderson walk away, I felt joy bubbling up from deep within. After years of being called ugly and treated with contempt by my family, I had found my calling thanks to Sarah. I wanted to help others experience the same transformation through makeup. And maybe, just maybe, if I worked hard enough, Mother might finally acknowledge me. I think that feeling, that desperate hope for validation, drove me forward more than I wanted to admit. I threw myself into preparation for the events with the same intensity I'd applied to learning makeup. I conducted customer surveys, asking detailed questions about what topics interested them most. I spent hours comparing new products with existing ones, testing combinations, and developing techniques that would work for different skin types and concerns. My first event was scheduled for a Saturday morning. I arrived 2 hours early, hands shaking as I set up the demonstration area. "You've got this, Rose," Mr. Anderson said, appearing beside me with a cup of coffee. "Just be yourself. That's what the customers love about you." Thankfully, all my events were well received. What started as small gatherings of 5 or 6 people grew into crowds that filled our designated space. I remember one particular session that changed everything. Today, I want to talk about something we don't discuss enough in the beauty industry, I began, addressing the crowd. We're going to learn how to enhance our natural features without trying to become someone else. A woman in the front row raised her hand. "Well, what if our natural features aren't good enough?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "What if we're just plain?" I met her eyes, seeing my own past insecurities reflected there. "There's no such thing as plain features," I replied. "There are only features waiting to be celebrated. Let me show you what I mean." I invited her to be my model, and as I worked, I explained each step, each choice, each technique. By the end, she was beaming at her reflection, tears in her eyes. "I never knew I could look like this," she whispered. "Thank you." Moments like these made everything worthwhile. After each successful event, Mr. Anderson would appear with his characteristic warm smile. "Rose, another successful event." "Thanks to you, Mr. Anderson." "You look happy." "Yes, I hope I'm finally contributing something worthwhile to Mother's company." "Rose?" Mr. Anderson seemed to want to say something more but held back. As CEO himself, he'd probably heard rumors about how differently my mother treated Victoria and me. His eyes held a sadness I couldn't quite understand at the time. Still, I took pride in contributing to the company's success. My events were bringing in new customers, and sales were steadily increasing. Once, when passing Mother in the hallway of the main office, she actually said, "Not bad." Though she immediately walked away, it was the first time she'd ever praised me. Had Mother finally recognized me? The thought made my heart soar. Despite being busy with event preparations, I felt incredibly happy. I even started allowing myself to dream about a future where I might be accepted as a real part of the family business. But my joy was completely misplaced. I was about to learn just how wrong I'd been. "The company will go to Victoria. You're fired." My mother laughed, the words echoing in her plush office. "But..." The word caught in my throat as I struggled to process what was happening. It was just another Monday when I was suddenly called to the CEO's office. My mother, the company president, delivered this news with a laugh that seemed to mock every moment of hope I'd ever had. Victoria stood beside her, smirking, perfectly manicured nails drumming against the back of my mother's chair. "This can't... what about the events I'm scheduled for?" I managed to ask, thinking of all the customers who had already signed up.
"And that's not our problem."
They laughed in unison, the sound grating against my ears. My chest felt tight as panic set in. No, this was the only place I belonged. "But many customers are waiting. I've contributed to company sales." "Ugh, you're so annoying." Mother slammed her hand on the desk. "I said you're fired, didn't I? Victoria's going to be CEO next week, so just accept it. An ugly duckling like you should just do what she's told. Besides, Victoria will surpass your sales numbers in no time." "But..." "Victoria takes over as CEO next week. I'll give you a week's notice. Make sure you say your goodbyes properly so you don't cause Victoria any trouble. This decision is final." "Yes." The word came out barely above a whisper. I felt like I'd been thrown from heaven into hell. My happy days had ended in an instant. The office that had once seemed like a potential sanctuary now felt like a prison, the walls closing in around me. Ignoring my shock, Mother and Victoria continued their cruel commentary. "Finally, I won't have to look at your face anymore. What a relief." Mother sighed dramatically. Victoria tossed her hair, her diamond earrings catching the light.
"Yeah, get out already. I don't want your ugliness rubbing off on me. Plus, it's getting hot in here with you around."
Despite suddenly being fired, I couldn't leave things in chaos. I spent my remaining days contacting all relevant parties and scheduling farewell meetings. I worked through the weekend to wrap everything up, making sure no customer would be left hanging. The hardest part was saying goodbye to my regular clients. Many of them had become more than customers. They were friends who had supported my growth.
"Rose, Don't be too discouraged.
Mrs. Chen, a loyal client, gripped my hands tightly. Thanks. I tried to smile, but it felt wooden on my face.
You'll do great wherever you go,
she insisted, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Thank you. I'll do my best. Fortunately, many people offered words of encouragement during my farewell visits. Their kindness made the situation both easier and harder to bear. Easier because I felt supported, harder because I knew I would miss them terribly. Finally, I went to say goodbye to the person who had helped me most, Mr. Anderson. His office felt like a safe haven, warm and welcoming, even on this difficult day. Rose, I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. So you know. I couldn't meet his eyes. I felt terrible about abandoning the events he had proposed, leaving everything unfinished. The guilt weighed heavily on my shoulders. I'm so sorry things ended this way, especially after all your support. Well, about that. Mr. Anderson leaned forward in his chair, his expression serious but kind. How would you like to keep working here? What? I looked up sharply, sure I had misheard. Since your events began, you've developed quite a following, and customers love you. We'd hate to lose you. I was so surprised by Mr. Anderson's offer that I froze, unable to respond. He continued, If you're interested, I'd like you to become our exclusive makeup artist. Of course, it's your choice. Really? You'd let me? My voice cracked with emotion. Absolutely. I was planning to discuss this with you soon anyway. This just speeds things up. Thank you so much. I'd love to. After feeling like I'd been cast into hell, suddenly I was in heaven again. The relief was so overwhelming that I had to grip the edge of his desk to stay steady. I eagerly accepted Mr. Anderson's generous offer, still hardly believing my luck. The transition was smoother than I expected. Many of my regular customers followed me, expressing relief that they could continue working with me. One significant change emerged in my new role. I stopped recommending my mother's company's products. The decision wasn't made out of spite, but necessity. The truth was, their quality had been declining rapidly. Many products had poor textures or contained harmful ingredients that I couldn't, in good conscience, recommend to my clients. I remember one particularly eye-opening incident when a longtime client came in with an allergic reaction.
I tried the new foundation from your mother's line, she said, her face red and irritated. The sales associate said it was their best product yet.
Examining the ingredient list, I found several known irritants that hadn't been in their previous formulations. The products increasingly didn't live up to their marketing claims, and these issues had only increased since my departure. These small problems added up, and I decided to stop promoting their products entirely. There were so many better options available, and I wanted my customers to have the best. My loyalty was to their well-being, not to a company that had discarded me. About a month later, just as I'd expected, my mother called. Her voice, usually so controlled and cold, had an edge of desperation. "Rose, honey," she cooed, the sudden sweetness in her tone making me wince. "You must be struggling to find work. Why don't you come back to our company?" I sighed, staring at my phone screen. "Our sales have plummeted since you left." Checking my phone during break, I found countless missed calls from my mother. She'd left numerous voicemails, all saying things like, "We'll hire you back," or "Come back to us." The desperation in her messages grew with each passing day. I could only sigh, remembering all the times she'd called me worthless, ugly, unwanted. Now suddenly I was needed? Mr. Anderson had already told me what was happening with my mother and Victoria. One afternoon, he called me into his office, his expression grave. "Rose, about your mother and sister." "Yes?" What he told me was shocking, though perhaps it shouldn't have been. They tried to copy my makeup events, thinking, if Rose can do it, we certainly can. But their approach revealed their true colors. During their events, they repeatedly made comments like, "Makeup is a privilege for naturally beautiful people, not for ugly ones." They only selected conventionally attractive customers for demonstrations, telling others, "Our products can't help you. You need good genes to start with." One particularly disastrous event stood out. A young woman had asked Victoria for advice about covering acne scars. Instead of helping, Victoria had laughed.
Maybe you should fix your face first before thinking about makeup,
She sneered. The woman had left in tears, and her social media post about the incident had gone viral. Unsurprisingly, customers were outraged. The company's reputation, built over years of successful business, was crumbling. Even worse, when my mother's business partners commented that Rose was more attentive and caring towards customers, my mother and Victoria threw tantrums. In their anger, they accidentally revealed why they'd fire me.
We couldn't keep her around looking like that,
Victoria had shouted during a particularly heated meeting.
She was ugly. It was embarrassing.
Of course, fired for being ugly isn't a legally acceptable reason for termination. Word spread among business partners that they couldn't work with a company that would fire someone for such a superficial reason, especially in the beauty industry. When Mr. Anderson heard these rumors, he warned me to be careful. They might try something desperate. Just then, my mother's voice brought me back to reality as another call came through. Rose, sweetie, she simpered, Victoria just isn't cutting it. I'll make you CEO if you come back. Please? I sighed deeply, feeling nothing but exhaustion. Come on, Rose. Her voice took on a wheedling tone I'd never heard before. I'm sorry, but that's impossible. Why not? Because I'm working for another company now. Just quit that place. I listened to my mother's words with detachment, as if they were coming from a stranger. Any remaining familial affection I had disappeared completely. The woman begging me to return was the same one who had delighted in throwing me away. Are you joking? You fired me for being ugly, remember? It's ridiculous that you're asking me to come back now. But nothing. Then at least use our products. No, I said firmly. Your company's products have become substandard lately. I can't in good conscience recommend them to my clients. I want to provide my customers with truly beneficial products, so I must decline. What? Have you forgotten everything I've done for you, you ungrateful child? The irony of her words almost made me laugh. Ungrateful? When I didn't want to leave the company, you wouldn't even listen to me. Don't call me again. Goodbye. I hung up and blocked my mother's number, feeling strangely light. My mother had always favored Victoria and ignored my feelings. Without realizing it, I'd gotten used to suppressing my opinions around her, always trying to be smaller, less noticeable, less troublesome. Standing up to her felt liberating, like breaking free from invisible chains I hadn't even known I was wearing. As for what happened to my mother's company, well, the collapse was as spectacular as it was predictable. Sales continued to plummet. They tried developing new products, but they were all poor quality, clearly cutting corners to maximize profits. The once premium brand became known for causing skin reactions and breakouts. When customers asked about these products, I was honest. I cannot recommend them. There are better alternatives that will actually help you achieve your goals. Victoria's leadership proved disastrous. She treated employees the same way she treated customers, with contempt and arrogance. Talented staff members began leaving in droves, taking their expertise with them. The company's reputation, built over decades, crumbled in months. Eventually, the company collapsed under massive debt. The final blow came when several customers filed a class action lawsuit over adverse reactions to their new skincare line. The details that emerged during the trial about cost-cutting measures and ignored safety protocols sealed their fate. Now both of them work entry-level jobs, Mother as a part-timer at a small boutique, and Victoria in retail. The last I heard, Victoria was working at the same type of drugstore where I'd started, though without my dedication to customer service. How the mighty have fallen. Victoria tried calling several times, her messages growing increasingly desperate.
Rose, please, you have to help us. We're family.
But I blocked her number too. The word family meant nothing coming from someone who had treated me like a burden all my life. While I don't care about them anymore, I am grateful in a way. Their cruelty had pushed me to find my true calling. Thanks to them, I discovered my passion and learned I could change. Sometimes, the worst experiences lead us to the best outcomes. I continued working hard to bring quality products to my customers,
focusing on each person's individual needs. My approach remained consistent: honest recommendations, personalized attention, and genuine care for each client's well-being. Thanks to this approach, I've developed a loyal following that continues to grow. Word of mouth spread beyond our local area, and I was recently interviewed by a major TV network about my philosophy on beauty and customer service. "What makes your approach different?" the interviewer asked. "Beauty isn't about hiding who you are," I replied. "It's about celebrating what makes you unique. Every person who sits in my chair is already beautiful. My job is just to help them see it." Good things kept coming. I now travel worldwide, managing international store locations and training other makeup artists in my customer-focused approach. My methods have become a case study in several business schools, focusing on how authentic care for customers can transform a business. But the biggest surprise of my life was yet to come. Today, back in the States for a rare event, I found myself in familiar territory. The department store where everything had changed was hosting a special demonstration session. "How are you doing, Rose?" I turned to see Mr. Anderson standing there, looking much the same as he had years ago when he first offered me a chance. "Mr. Anderson, everything's going great thanks to you." He had come to check on my event during my rare visit home. The space was packed with eager attendees, some of whom had traveled hours to attend. I might not get another chance, so I had to ask him something that had been on my mind for years. "Mr. Anderson, thank you." "What's this about?" "You've done so much for me. I wouldn't be here without you. I don't know how to thank you enough."
"You're very welcome."
His warm smile remained unchanged, but there was something in his eyes, a mixture of pride and something else I couldn't quite identify. "Mr. Anderson?"
"Yes?"
Why have you always been so kind to me?"
"Well..."
Mr. Anderson fell silent, seeming deep in thought. The bustling sounds of the department store faded into the background as I waited patiently for his answer. After what felt like an eternity,
"Rose, or should I say, daughter."
"What?" The word hit me like a physical blow.
"The truth is, I'm your father."
But Mother said you died when I was little." My voice sounded strange in my own ears, distant and shaky.
"So that's what she told you."
He sighed heavily, his shoulders dropping slightly. Sighing, "My father, Mr. Anderson, told me everything. The truth was far different from what I'd been led to believe." Both he and my mother were CEOs when they divorced. Their busy schedules led to arguments about work-life balance and priorities. While my father wanted to make time for family, my mother was increasingly obsessed with appearances and success. The final straw came when he overheard her berating me for being ugly when I was just a child. He had confronted her about her behavior, but she refused to change. The divorce followed shortly after. After the divorce, he kept tabs on Mother, Victoria, and me through business connections. He regretted causing me pain, but couldn't see me because Mother had obtained a restraining order, refusing all contact and threatening legal action if he tried to reach out. He'd heard about my success from industry colleagues and had been supporting me from afar, watching proudly as I built my own path. "So that's what happened," I whispered, memories of my childhood shifting and rearranging themselves with this new information.
"I'm sorry for keeping quiet all this time."
His voice was thick with emotion. "Then, is that why you offered me the events opportunity?"
"No, that's different. Well, not entirely different."
He smiled softly.
"But I truly believed you would succeed."
"What do you mean?"
"I'd heard rumors about your reputation, about a sales associate who was exceptionally kind to customers. When I saw you in action, you were carefully considering each customer's needs and treating everyone with respect. You reminded me of myself when I first started in business."
"That's just basic customer service."
"Not everyone can do that. Look at Victoria and your mother. They never understood that true beauty comes from how you treat others, not just how you look."
When I stayed silent, processing this revelation, he continued.
That's why I knew you'd succeed. And you have, haven't you? You've built lasting connections.
Connections?
Yes, connections. Your genuine care for customers resonates with people, and those connections spread. Haven't you noticed how many customers come specifically to see you?
Thinking about it, he was right. I never advertised. Customers came through word of mouth, saying they'd heard about me from friends or family. Gradually, more people started coming specifically for consultations with me. Each satisfied customer became an ambassador, spreading the word about my approach to beauty and customer care. I see. Connections.
You have to cherish the connections you make, he said softly. They're what make life meaningful.
My father smiled at me, and for the first time, I recognized my own features in his face. The same eyes, the same smile that Mother had always criticized. I started at my mother's company because I had no other choice, and there I met Sarah. Maybe without Sarah, I wouldn't be who I am today. Meeting her led me to learn about makeup. Indeed, each connection had led me to where I am now. Even the painful ones with my mother and Victoria had ultimately pushed me toward my true path. You're right. I silently vowed to help create meaningful connections for others, just as others had done for me. After all, true beauty isn't about perfect features or flawless makeup. It's about the connections we make and the way we make others feel about themselves. As I prepared for my next demonstration, I looked out at the crowd of eager faces. Each person there represented a potential connection, a chance to pass on what I'd learned about beauty, both inside and out. And isn't that what true redemption is all about?